I still remember the anxiety of those early veterinary career days, second guessing myself, feeling like I had to have all the answers, and wondering if I was really cut out for this. If that feels familiar, you're not alone. Ready Vet Go is the mentorship program I wish I had. A 7-month journey with live mentorship, community, and real world skills to help you grow your confidence. It's perfect for early career vets and anyone making a transition into small animal practice, but anyone is welcome to join. New cohorts start in July and October, and you can get 10% off with the code SPRINKLE at readyvetgo.co. You don't have to figure it out alone. Welcome to Vet Life Reimagined. This is a fun conversation with guest Dr. Jeff Klemens, who shares his winding path through clinical medicine from a self-taught but confidence-building start in a multi-generational practice to nearly owning a clinic to ultimately discovering fulfillment and relief work. We discuss powerful lessons on mentorship, diverse practice types, and the changing landscape of veterinary medicine. Dr. Jeff's ability to share very practical wisdom in a fun way makes this a very engaging conversation. And while we didn't go in depth into his many fun interests like craft beer and tabletop gaming, we do discuss how he keeps his enthusiasm in veterinary medicine while also enjoying life and interests outside of vet med. This is a great story of how you can reimagine clinical medicine to have control of your schedule and fit your style. Let's get to the conversation with Dr. Jeff Klemens. When did you know you wanted to get into veterinary medicine?
It's a good question. I was just talking with my mom about this on family vacation. Yeah, so when I was a 6th grader, a local veterinarian came to our middle school and she brought a cat and a peach-faced lovebird and just talked to us about being veterinarians. And I walked away from that like, hey, that sounds really cool. Like being a doctor for animals. How cool is that? And I think that was the spark. The other piece of it is I claim that it's somewhat genetic. My maternal grandfather was a animal lover, was a bit of a conservationist in ways, but also ran away and joined the circus when he was in late high school and was a horse groom. And so I think he always had this desire. So I claim that some of it was just inherited. And after that 6th grade meeting, yeah, that was it. From that point on, it was like, no, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. So
instead of circus, medicine. So yeah, it's
right.
When you were, starting to really develop that idea of what it would look like for you, did you have an idea to start with? And did that evolve as you got into vet school and things? How was that kind of thought about what a veterinarian would be for you?
Sure. So I was always dog and cat focused, with originally the idea that maybe I would do exotics. I started as a kennel kid my senior year in high school, working for one of the local clinics. That was my sort of progenitor clinic. That was the clinic I grew up in. Turned out that there was a magnet that I was gifted on that 6th grade presentation that I found later in my metal shop toolbox that I made in 7th grade, and discovered that the East Side Animal Hospital magnet was there. I do a lot of miniatures painting and gaming. And so that it was this very full circle moment that I came back around and was like, here I am at this clinic. And one of the doctors at this clinic was probably the doctor that spoke to me. And I just didn't even know it as a 6th grader. And yeah, it was dogs and cats. I did not grow up, I'm a city mouse. I am not a country mouse. I thought 4-H was part of Girl Scouts. I didn't know that 4-H was its own thing. So I had a real eye-opening introduction to agricultural veterinary medicine as a student. So it's always been dogs and cats. And for a little while in vet school, I thought about exotics, and I just kind of, I guess, wandered away from it. It just seemed like, hey, there's a lot to know here. Maybe I should just stick to 2 species and get good at that. So it was pretty much dog and cat, small animal practice from the get-go.
Excellent. So, as you were transitioning from vet school into being doctor, what were you thinking about when you were thinking about the first practice that you might go into and start?
In the beginning, it was like just excited to have a job. Uh, because I was 27 when I graduated, and I hadn't been in school since I was 4. I started preschool, and I was just the like not being in school. Like I was just so ready to have a job. So I worked in North Central Indiana, and I had a couple of opportunities. My hope was that I could find a multi-doctor practice. I didn't want to be number 2. I was hoping I could be at least number 3, thinking that if I had a couple other docs around, that would have, just given me some extra support. But after that, it really was, small animal. I was trying to find a facility that looked nice. I didn't really have, like, I knew what my hospital was like, the hospital I grew up in, but I didn't have a lot of experience in other clinics. So that was my one real world example. And, it was a nice clinic. So I was conscientious of the space I was going into. But I think after that, like, what the salary was the salary. I didn't have any, like, it was 50,000 a year when I graduated in 2005. So that's a different kind of pay than now, 20 years later. But even at that time, when I got that first paycheck, wow, look at this. This is amazing.
Going from negative to positive is good.
Or having been a poor student for a very long time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. I just listened to an episode with Ernie Ward, and he was talking about that too. Like the initial salary of veterinarians, a couple of decades ago, it's hugely different. Well, and I remember you telling me, so speaking of generation, but the clinic you ended up finding, you were doctor number 3, I think. So there
Mhm.
were 2 other veterinarians, and they were a very different generation. You said like they graduated vet school, I think, before you were born. They were some of
Yeah.
the initial like small veterinarians. So what was that like working for a very different generation? How did you feel that first day and kind of getting your feet wet?
Yeah. And when you think back on it, I think about it differently than how I felt about it at the time. They were really good to me. They were really nice guys. They were always ready to answer questions that I had. But it really was like the first day was like, hey, bud, we do surgery in the morning, see treatments in the afternoon, and see appointments, and, have a good day. And off they went. And so that was like, oh, okay. So there was very little structure. There was no, not that there wasn't mentorship in a way, but not in any like forward thinking structured environment. Not neither of those guys did cytologies. So, I was like, oh, well, I do this thing called an ear cytology, and how I figure out what's going on in otitis. And, so I just started doing it because I knew how, and they had the stuff. And then eventually, Doc Lindsay, hey, bud, if you want to do one of those cytologies for me, he handed me some swabs, but I just, I think I, I was a little more self-taught than I was guided taught in the first couple of years, which I think for me ended up being great. I had a really good set of skills when I started my second job, but that was more because I had to sort of learn on the fly.
Yeah.
Than with a lot of guidance.
I think it speaks also volumes to your veterinary education coming from vet school too, because I think you said you also had a really good foundation for dentistry coming out of vet school, which I don't think is the most common thing across the board of veterinary schools. And I think that was actually a big moment of when you were starting to see that these additional skills that you had could be really valuable in a business perspective as well, not to mention patient care. So you mind sharing a little bit about like as you're being very self-driven that you're starting to start to build confidence and see these things that can be beneficial for the practice.
Yeah, it was. I was really lucky. that we had a dentist at Purdue who taught curriculum. And it wasn't, everybody couldn't get in. So it was that whole like senior block, like, hey, you can tell us what you want to do. We'll do our best. So I took the junior year course. I took the senior year block. So yeah, I was really eager. And, the clinic had an ultrasonic scaler, and it had 4 things that were called elevators. That was probably a generous title for those particular instruments. And I just, I used a hand Dremel once. I used a tiny hacksaw to section a tooth once. Like, just some stuff that was like, man, there's better. Like, this is hard and this is not really good. Like, I got to figure something out. And one of the doctors was really willing to kind of lean into that with me, and we built out a fully like tricked out dental suite. So we went to Western, and I went to WVC, and we bought a IM3 high-speed handpiece, and we drove up to the town north of where the clinic was to a human dentistry like resale shop where, if you needed a chair, you needed a light or whatever, we bought a wall-mounted old school dental x-ray machine and got a little chairside developer unit. And all of a sudden, I was doing dental radiography, I was doing regional anesthesia, and I was making flaps and sectioning teeth, and took a lot of pride in like, hey, like, check this out, like, look what I can do. And that was a kind of one of those, transitional moments, because I presented them, I took stats for 6 months, and just to show like, hey, this is the kind of revenue that I can generate, and doing really good patient care at the same time. And yeah, it just wasn't, it wasn't received in the way that I thought it would be received. They were like, yeah, this is great. But it wasn't hey, we're really glad you built this. We're going to try to focus more dentistry your way so we can keep growing this. And that was a little bit of a bummer, to not have what I thought would have been really well received and further implemented.
They did not jump on that enthusiasm bandwagon. Well, and maybe just to take a moment, and especially now, because like you said, everything in hindsight, right? Just kind of
Sure.
reflecting on those changes over generations of working in practice. Do you think that values have changed? Do you think that was unique just for them? Like, what do you think kind of the evolution of how we think about veterinary medicine?
Yeah, no, I think the values have changed. I think animals have and maybe we should say this, there's a spectrum, right? Like there's this whole group of pet owners, and there are still people on one end of this pet owner spectrum that they are beasts of burden, they are food, they are not family members. And then you go to the other side of the spectrum where, like, people don't have children, they have dogs or cats. So you really have this whole wide group of people. But I would say in my time in veterinary medicine, the emphasis, the desire, the willingness to do more and do things at an elevated level has absolutely grown. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah. And just perspective too, if they had finished vet school before you were born, they also may not have been like, yes, let's do this completely innovative thing when they were like, I want to retire.
Yeah,
I don't know.
no, I think that's totally true. And I think, I've always felt that like this thing that we do as veterinarians, this career was started by men who were farm vets. Like, veterinarians started in agriculture. That is our origin story. And we took care of dogs and cats because there were just dogs and cats around. We weren't really there for the dogs and cats. It just happened to be that we needed also to help them. And, then like they're in the late 70s, early 80s, all of a sudden small animal medicine gets a shingle. It gets a place. And then there's this shift between the gender dynamic. where now we're like, this is a ladies' game. Like, hey, it is. It's true. Like, and I like, it's great, but it's really changed. The veterinarian has changed. The person who is the veterinarian is a very different person than the people who were veterinarians in the beginning of this profession. The knowledge is, I mean, I don't even know how you can measure that. Like how much more we know now compared to then. Like
Really?
the number of options, the number of therapies that we have, the number of ways. I mean, it's crazy. Like it's so cool too. Like that's what's so great about it is, like look at this awesome stuff that we can do for dogs and cats and horses and llamas and dolphins and pick your species. Like
Really cool. And I think that kind of motivated you maybe for the next step was to where can I go where I can participate in this? So what did you find next in job number two?
yeah, so job number two was still sort of central Indiana, Northwest Indiana, and still a 3-doctor practice, but a 3-doctor practice that was very forward thinking, 7 exam rooms. I don't remember how many licensed RVTs. It was more than 0. So, I think there was 1 licensed RVT at my first job, and we had great assistants. And like, I have worked with non-licensed, non-credentialed support staff who are amazing. They are absolutely incredible. But it was new to me to have someone who I could just go, hey, can you do this? Can you take care of this thing or this thing? Because those are things that I don't necessarily have to do. We had a tricked out hospital, digital x-ray, had an ultrasound machine. We had a fume hood because we did some chemotherapy at that clinic. I had a CO2 laser, which was for someone who didn't have a lot of surgical experience in my first job. It made like the little bit of learning curve that was still there at 3 years out of school for general surgery, like a little smoother. And we did a lot. That like I worked a lot of hours in that clinic. The work-life balance probably wasn't great, but I didn't really know what work-life balance was. So to me, it was just what I did. I ended up getting some exotics experience too, because my boss at the time did work for the small local zoo. So we had all kinds of creatures in that hospital. And I came into that job pretty confident about outside of surgery, just because I had taught myself how to do things, and I'd spent the last 2.5 years, not alone, but not with like a whole lot of guidance on a regular basis. So I felt like, hey, I think I can do this. Like they always talked about 3 years out of school, like when we were students, like you'll get it, you'll wake up one day and you'll be like, oh, okay, cool, I got it. I feel like that was in that transition I wasn't so worried to walk into an exam room anymore. Like, I've seen enough stuff. Like, okay, cool. This dog is doing X. Okay, I've seen X or like X variation. So, okay, let's go check this out. So I had a lot of just personal confidence going into that second job.
And that also makes sense where you might also start thinking on, ooh, if I could do this myself, like practice ownership. I know you have kind of an interesting story around trying to do practice ownership. You mind sharing a little bit about that transition from, okay, when that itself was huge, going from, very basic. I'm sure some people were like, you did your own cytology? And then going into the practice with all the resources, all the things. And so you've got
Yeah.
personal confidence, right? Like I can figure it out. That's huge. And then you're getting all this experience on different ways of practicing. And so what started kind of if I could design all of this and I had ownership, what was kind of all of that going on?
Yeah. So I think a lot of us have found ourselves in a place where it's not that we weren't happy where we were, but we felt like things could be different. And myself and a classmate had both reached that point in our careers where it was like, you know what? we're pretty comfortable in our skill level, and we're realizing that if we really want to have say in how things work, we have to be the boss. We have to be the ones running that show. So we got together and found a place, and it was, we thought we were gonna like take this somewhat outdated standard of care in clinic and come in there and really like change it up and elevate the medicine and bring something different. We were on the cusp of, we had looked at the financials and we had sort of talked it out at multiple dinners, and it was time to go to the bank and find a lender. And we had dinner before that meeting. And my classmate said, I don't know that I want to be a veterinarian anymore. And it was like, oh, okay. Honestly, my gut reaction was not like, oh my God, like, what are we going to do? It was like, hey, like, are you sure? We worked really, really hard to get here. Like, don't throw this away. And it's like, if you need to take a break, like, thanks for speaking up now. We would have not been able to have maintained our friendship had you done this after we had signed a bunch of papers. So, luckily, I was working relief for our local ER just in this interim period to still make some money. And I had started, I call it volunteering. I would work a shift like randomly, like once every 2 months. And I just felt like, they needed a little extra help. And I really appreciated that I went home at night and I didn't answer the phone. So I had just started pulling a shift here and there just to like, I was getting paid. I mean, I wasn't doing this, gratis, but I felt like it was a complimentary thing for me to do, to just say thank you and help you guys out because you guys help me out all the time. So I was already kind of connected with that clinic, and they were looking to hire a new doctor. The person that they had lined up, it just didn't work out due to some other extraneous variables. So I was in this place where I need a job, and turns out I'm not going to be a practice owner. So I guess I'm going to be an ER. And that was how I transitioned into emergency medicine.
Well, and uh, I want to go back a little bit and you to elaborate a little bit she was a classmate. It sounds like you at least knew her well enough to have faith in making her a business partner. And yeah, that is a huge stark contrast to, thinking frequently about how to create your own business to I don't want anything to do with veterinary medicine anymore. That's so stark. And, I think this is interesting, like all the things we've talked about so much. To me, it's building how you're able to be such a good mentor, I think, for early veterinarians as well. But I mean, w- this is not her story. This is yours. But any other thoughts around that when you're also kind of reflecting maybe some takeaways for other people? What are your thoughts around that? Have you seen that multiple times? Have you seen what might help in those situations?
Yeah, so I think in her case, there was some personal life stuff going on, there was some professional life stuff going on, and I think it just came to a head for her, and this was her, like, this was how I was going to answer this problem. Ultimately, she took a sabbatical and she came back into the profession.
Okay.
So I think that to me is the like, you can take a break. That was the thing that I took away from that was if you're really stuck and you're like, man, I don't want to do this anymore. Like maybe you just need some time away, cool off to decompress, to try to remember the things about this that you really love. And then remember that like those three little letters that you get with your diploma, you can apply those letters in lots and lots of places. So I think that's the other thing. Like, take a break and remember that this isn't all about clinical medicine. You don't have to be a clinician. You really don't. If this isn't working out for you, it's okay. It's totally okay. Like, there are other places where you can still connect with your whatever the passion was that got you into this profession. You can still get that. You just have to look in other places.
Yeah. Well, and then also, even in clinical medicine, you can practice it in lots of different ways. You're about to talk about being an ER vet, and you also
Mhm.
mentioned not having that work-life balance earlier. Happen to know you have lots of interest and things that you like to do. Does that come in at all with the ER work, or is that later that you start to kind of figure out the
Well,
the balance of you and how to incorporate everything?
yeah. So in the beginning, it seemed awesome. I'm used to working 5 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week. And now I'm working 14 shifts a month. Like, that's 15 or 16 days where I don't have to work at all. Oh, what am I going to do with all this free time? So in the beginning, it was very, very like welcoming. I was like, yeah, like this is great. Now, as you start to work through your ER shifts, you realize that, well, you know, like it's not exactly 14 shifts a month. It's 14 plus a shift here or there because somebody is sick, somebody's on vacation. I worked a lot of nights predominantly. So at that time, it was fine. I could be a night person, but then you realize that none of your friends are night people. And even though I was much younger, you can't just flop from nighttime to daytime life. It's actually kind of challenging. So the shine, wore off eventually, but initially, probably the first, I don't know, 2 to 3 years was golden. It was great. I was doing cool stuff and I was making really good money and I had lots more free time. It was really engaging. And I think I was pretty lucky. ER pre-COVID and ER post-COVID. I think, like, I hate to use this COVID designation as this ultimate timestamp, but it was different. Like, it changed. Things were just different, and maybe things were changing along the way, and COVID just helped sort of usher in that change. Because I don't know that I'd have made it for 5 years in contemporary ER. 5 years later, I'm not sure I could have done it for that long now. I still love it, but it's way more fun to do, 1 or 2 days a month. and during the daytime. And if you're lucky enough to work in a clinic where there's a hospitalist or there's a swing shift doctor, like, then like ER medicine's awesome because you've got a buddy, you've got somebody to help you. It's not just you trying to stay above the wave. So it was the right time and the right place. And I had a great staff, and the doctors I worked with had a really good group of colleagues who were super happy to just have another body. I'm sure we said no to nothing at my second job. Like, there was no, like, you just,
Referral?
okay, come in at 2, come in at 3.
Oh,
So like, we saw emergencies every day. It wasn't too different, but it was different enough, but they were great. So I had a really good experience in the ER work that I did. I think that helped.
yeah. And again, just highlighting that one ER is not necessarily the next. Like, there are different ways, there's different clinics that you may mesh better with. The people are a huge part of work. We don't talk about that a lot. I think in vet med, you do in all the others. It's like, me being in industry for so long, the people that you're going to work with are like, they can make or break a job. Like, even if you love what you're doing, like, you won't love it if you don't like the people you're working with. And so that's good that you were working well with your colleagues? You felt supported, so even when it's a hard day, you don't feel completely depleted at the end because you've got that support. I think all of those things are so huge to look out for. And the COVID thing, I think that's a fact of life too, is it did greatly impact culture, everything from how we look at wellness, people's trust in government, but even how we approach healthcare, both I think for people as well as our pets and everything else that goes with it. I mean, we've been talking about the evolution of pet ownership, everything from, the first
Sure.
doctors who created it because, oh, wow, we're getting a few more pets to, no, these are now people's kids. And we have all this technology that we can use to support healthcare. Like things change. And I think that's good to know as well, but also again to go back and make sure that you are finding what works for you, that you are supporting yourself, and you discover that relief work is just like perfect for you. So, how did you then go
Yeah.
into like, no, this is what I love to do? Because I think you mentioned someone had called you and asked you about it, and you're like, or no, I don't want to change. This is exactly what fits me.
There's all those days that you're not working. So you start to think, well, maybe I could do a little side work. Like I was in a point where I was thinking about maybe building a house and like, okay, I can make a little extra money on the side. So I started to do relief work with a clinic that was owned by one of the board members at that ER. So that ER was created by a large number of general practitioners. So they all pitched in to sort of create that space. And he had a little one doctor clinic that just needed somebody there like on Wednesdays and maybe a Saturday here or there. And he and I had interacted enough just working at the ER with cases that came from his clinic. And he's like, hey man, would you, we're just looking for somebody to fill in. I was like, sure, that sounds great. And it was, it was very enlightening because again, here's another sort of full circle moment. I'm in this little one doctor practice in this rural town in central Indiana. And I realized that like he's just trying to get people to do annual heartworm and fecals, which they weren't doing previously. And the pushback is intense. And that's what my classmate and I were going to do. Like we were going to take this clinic and we were just going to show up and say, hey, like this is actually a really good thing to do. And here's why. And we would really encourage you to do this every year. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. So I think, it was a lesson in that may not have gone well. So maybe it was okay that went the way it went. Because here I was now, not the owner, but living that experience and working, doing silly stuff like working an overnight and then going to work GP or working GP and then going to work an overnight. And it like, again, I was a younger person and more energy and more stamina. But it made me realize that like, hey, I kind of like this and really transitioning from ER to full-time relief, there's a lot of similarities because one of the things that I think is a drawback for people, you don't necessarily build the connections with owners when you do relief because you're just there for a moment. So in the same way that I might see something in the ER and work it up in the ER and have a treatment plan and say, okay, do this, follow up with your primary care vet in X period of time. Well, if they don't care to do that, they're like, no, I don't want to do this. Okay. Like it's like, I don't have any control over it anymore. Same thing in relief. I can make suggestions and I can get a plan together, but somebody might look at that plan and go, nah, I'm going to do something else. And it's okay with me. So, but I was already used to that. So that transition was really easy. And I just felt like if I could do relief in Northwest Central Indiana, and I could go to any city, I could go anywhere where there was population, and I just had to get my foot in the door. And I had done, 5 years of overnights. I felt like I was ready for something else. It was time to do something different. And this seemed a transition that I felt like I could do. It's like, hey, I'm pretty organized. I can make sure that I'm setting the schedule, and I got an accountant because I don't have a strong business acumen. So it's like, okay, they can need an accountant. So if I made a 6-month business plan and every month had things that I had to get done, and at the end of that 6 months was the end of my time in the ER, and I moved to north side of Indianapolis and became Reliable Relief Services. And I think I shared the Christmas card story with you, where to get my name out. So
Oh, yes. Tell that. Tell.
I basically wrote an introductory letter. I just introduced myself, who I was, but I disguised it in a very nice Christmas card that I hand wrote the address in the clinic, and I addressed it like I just looked up who the clinic owner was. So I addressed it to the clinic owner. I didn't put a return address on it. So it just looked like a Christmas card from a client to the owner, so that it wouldn't get seen as junk mail or spam, or it was just a Merry Christmas. I'm me. I'm moving to the area. If you need relief, please reach out. Here's my website where you can find further information, and here's my email. And I got 2 clinics through that, which was enough, I think. Right. I did that, and I put my name on the IVMA's website page with other relief veterinarians, and slowly but surely, here we are, creeping on 8 years later.
Well, and then you mentioned joining Relief Rover too. So I think you got lots of interesting connections, meeting Cindy, Trice, and some
Yeah.
others. And it does sound like you have lots of interesting relationships and connections along the way. So what was Relief Rover? Maybe how does that work? Because you still have Reliable Relief. So it sounds like you still have your practice. So maybe explain how that works, how joining Relief Rover works, and just like all the relationships that you're kind of building through all this.
Sure. So I met Cindy because Cindy was doing a talk at WVC at the very beginning of the creation of Relief Rover. And I was just starting out doing relief work. And I was like, oh, wow, what a great idea. Like, I got to go listen to this talk. And, it was just her talking about creating the space for community and to try and help people make connections. And I was like, this is great. Like, you're great. Like, how awesome is this? I want to be part of this. So I signed up and became part of Relief Rover, which is now part of Hound. So now Hound has brought that inside of Hound as one of their arms. So it's still there. It's just a little different now. But I think that really helped reassure me that I was making the right choice. Like meeting Cindy and becoming part of that community, even though I didn't necessarily get a lot of work from that, I got leads, but I also got introduced to other people, which ends up, again, another full circle moment as we keep going. So the business sort of website part of it was, my wife is a graphic designer and she's very good. So living with an in-house graphic designer who has legit skills, she built my website, and I've had lots of compliments, but she knew what she was doing. And she just has this way of knowing what something should look like and be attractive and not off-putting. Her aesthetic in design is really, really amazing. So I have this website, and then I have a calendar. So now, you can't see my schedule, but you can reach out to me and request dates. And that was a big piece of how I really developed a lot of the clientele initially, the website itself and personal connections. I think everybody, hopefully, I don't know, maybe everybody doesn't, but there's a lot of veterinarians, but it's kind of a small community. Like it's a very complicated Venn diagram where there's a lot of intersecting circles in vet med. So yeah, I think the website just put me out there and gave people a way to find me, and that's all it really took. I think work finds you as a relief veterinarian. You don't have to go looking for work as much as long as you've got your name out there.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that there was that support, that Cindy saw that need too, because being a relief veterinarian, I'm sure like you mentioned one potential con for some people, right, is you're not building long relationships with clients. You're also not around the same colleagues all the time. And there's kind of pros and cons to both, right? Depending on how you look at it and who you are. But for you, what are the things about current work that just keep you excited and staying enthusiastic about veterinary medicine? And then what might be some potential challenges that you've kind of learned to work with?
Yeah. For me, control is schedule. I have learned that is a priceless attribute. You can't put a value on control of the schedule. I go where I want to go when I want to go, the vast majority of the time. I love new environments. Like I just went to a couple of new clinics last month, and it was so exciting because it was a new space for me. And I knew one of the CSRs at one of the clinics. So I already had like a personal connection there. Turns out there was an RVT who I'd worked with at another practice. Again, small world thing. So I love different. And I think one of the other things is, to me, this is a major con for sure. Like there are some people that like, I do this procedure like this with these drugs, full stop. I treat this problem like this with these drugs, full stop. When you do relief, you do not necessarily get to play in the same sandbox every time. So it forces you to sometimes solve problems with different materials, with different drugs, with different techniques. And I think that just makes me a better clinician because I've picked up a few things along the way, like, oh, I've never seen anybody do something like that before. That's pretty clever. I'm going to write that down. So I think that for me, that's a real plus. It's not a negative because part of what still makes this really fun and exciting is the problem solving. Puppies and kittens are, they're great. That's nice to have in between things. I wouldn't want to do that all day long. Like I can't do vaccine clinic. I don't get any like personal fulfillment. I don't mind that complicated multi-endocrinopathy dog. Like it's not like fun. Like I don't think I would file that under fun, but it's the part of it that to me really is why this is still engaging. It's because I want to try to fix that. I want to try to make that better. So that's what's and to be forced to do it differently is good. It's good for me. And I think the other con is, you have to, this might be scary to do if you were alone. Like if you didn't have another person who was your roommate, your spouse, your plus one, your, another income, another, like, not being worried about having shifts scheduled, about, hey, I've only got like the next 3 weeks scheduled. I have not found that to be a problem. Finding work again has not been challenging, but not knowing, not having a steady income, potentially having to cover, like, if you don't have, like, my health insurance, thankfully is through my wife and her work. Like I had pretty garbage health insurance when I first started out because I was just using something through the public space. There are aspects of this that you do have to take care of on your own, which I think is where some of the cons come from. But for me, it really is. It's control of the schedule, and it's things don't get stale. You're going somewhere new, you're working with different folks, maybe you go back to a clinic that you haven't been in 5 months, so it's almost like it's new again because you just haven't been there in a while. And there's something about, for the most part, I wrote this in a mentorship, like, speaking engagement once, that you don't have to be Dr. House. Like,
Oh, yeah.
you don't have to be Doogie Howser, and Doogie Howser might be that might not register necessarily anymore with people.
I have to look that one up myself, but it's okay. I know Dr. House. It's
So that's Doogie Howser, MD, is Neil Patrick Harris's first television role.
Oh, okay. I do know Neil Patrick's hair.
Right? Yes. Most people know NPH. They might not know Doogie Howser, but yeah, you don't have to have all the answers. You have to be punctual. You have to be nice. You have to be a good teammate, and people are happy that you're there because they needed a doctor. So just being there and being nice, like, gets you a lot of very positive feedback. So it could be scary for some people, especially if you're not super extroverted. Like, this is probably not the career for the hardcore introvert. But what you find is that you're generally very well received because people are happy that you're there. And if you're a pretty good person and you're a good doctor, then it's easy. Like, they want you to come back. Like, they're happy when you come in. It's not Norm from Cheers. God bless John White. But there's a little bit of that. Like, when you walk into a place and, like, people are generally happy to see you, like, that feels good,
Yeah, I've heard that feedback from others in relief work, is that you feel appreciated because, there was an empty spot and you're there to support them. And like you were describing, this has given you a lot of opportunities to see how different people do different things. You never know what's going to come up. You have, each time is a new toolbox of resources that you're like, okay, almost like a kid's show. It's like, here's the challenge, here's your toolbox, that's changed. What are you gonna do?
That's a little double dare every once in a while. Yeah.
Yeah. And so having all this experience too of, again, how different things work, and again, going from a practice that did very little to having all the tools and whistles. And now you mentioned another full circle, and that was through Cindy, you met Danny. So you became part of Ready Vet Go, and became a mentor to early career veterinarians. And so I know we're running out of time, but I did want to get your, maybe like a top tip that, now from your experience and being a mentor for a few years now, what are some of the things that you think of if you were going to impart some advice for early career veterinarians? What are your thoughts?
So I think one of the things that we talk a lot about in Ready Vet Go, you have to be a little bit of a voice for yourself. And you should, particularly as a new graduate, you want to see, like, if you want mentorship, you want to see that in writing. Not just, oh yeah, we do it. Show me your program. Like, show me what it is to have mentorship in this practice, because it's a bit of an ambiguous word at times. So I think that's like tip number one for the new grad. For like the early career veterinarian, sometimes it's not another doctor in the practice. It's a seasoned RVT. There are people who are not doctors who work in this industry, who have incredible knowledge bases, and they want to help you too. So a doctor doesn't always have to be the mentor for everything. And I think this is one of Danny's big points, is like, it's not, I had a mentor. It's, I had mentors. I had different people along the way who were part of my experience. And maybe one was a practice manager, and maybe one was an RVT, maybe two were doctors. Don't think of it as there is this almighty right person who will be my guardian and my guiding light through this tumultuous period of my career. There's a whole bunch of people that can be there and help you with that. Yeah, and exactly. If I hadn't met Cindy, I wouldn't have met Danny. So yeah, when I sent my application for Ready Vet Go and then texted Cindy to say, hey, I just I submitted the thing. So, if you happen to see your friend Danny, you want to put a good word in for me, I would sure appreciate it. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. A few minutes later, here comes the picture of the two of them having a meal together. And it's like, okay, done. I was expecting that kind of turnaround, but thank you very much.
Back to being a close community.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, wonderful. I do like to end on this final question around gratitude. So, and this could be anything, but when you think about being grateful, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
I think that I am the most grateful for the people that I have worked with over time, because although I've done a lot of self-study and I've done a lot on my own, the list is too long of the people in all aspects of this career that have been part of my support system. And again, it's that whole you put the retrospective glasses on and you can sort of see things differently. Like, there are people that I never probably said thank you to, that I should have, because I just didn't realize what they were doing for me at the time. So yeah, I think the community at large is the thing that I'm most grateful for.
I hope you enjoyed this fascinating veterinary story. We can make an impact in so many places. Check out the show notes for lots of resources. Please make sure you are subscribed on your podcast app, subscribe on the YouTube channel, and follow me on LinkedIn, where I hang out the most. You can contact me on LinkedIn, on the website at vetlifereimagined.com, and to send me a text message, find the link at the top of the show notes below that says, send us a text message. I want to thank our longtime sponsors, Fire Consulting and Will Hughes, who support the podcast over on our hosting platform, Buzzsprout. You can support the podcast too. Just check out the show notes for a link. And I hope to see you next time on Vet Life Reimagined.